Hello, my name is Joshua Castle, and this is my presentation for Digital Media History 2023 on the unionization in the game industry. So, unions have been a big part of the American industry for over a century now. They first came into their own in the 1920s during the Gilded Age, and eventually, they've petered out a little bit in certain areas, but they still exist to a pretty massive extent. Recently, though, the game industry has seen an ever increasing rise in unionization throughout the industry. My question for this presentation is, why is this? So, there are a few points here to look at. Number one is the improved working conditions that unions can provide, the need for collective bargaining and negotiating in the game industry, as well as job security in the industry. These are all key points that the average game industry employee looks for and considers when thinking about unions. First point we're going to look at is the improved working conditions through unionization. So the first point here is unions, since their inception, have been the cornerstone for the idea known as modern collectivism. Essentially, it is to help negotiate for the rights and defenses of those rights in the workplace for the average employee. In this chart I have to the right, essentially shows the difference between union members and non-union members in pay, as well as the racial wealth gap among those members as well. It's pretty staggering the information that's given. So originally, though, unions came into their being as an idea to improve the community as a whole. The original goal was to help the community through a betterment of the work environment. This was done through the implementation of things such as the 40-hour work week. 40-hour work week, child labor laws, overtime, minimum wage, all that stuff is thanks to the unionization that took place in the 1920s. So, one thing that can be really a huge benefit for the game industry is the implementation of oversight over the most common, probably malpractice that the game industry does, which is that of crunch time. Crunch time is any time in the game industry over 40 hours. Typically, it's 60 to 80. But it's any time over 40 hours that is mandatory, and oftentimes it is unpaid. It can last for weeks, months, even years. With unions, there would be a massive oversight for this not oversight, a massive net essentially to protect the average worker with this type of action. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is, with unions, the average worker wouldn't have to worry about not getting paid for that, because there would be systems set in place to allow them, if a company didn't pay them for crunch time, they would get docked or fined. That's a big thing in the electrical industry or the industrial industry. If you don't pay your employees, you can get fined and potentially even shut down. The next point is collective bargaining. So collective bargaining is essentially allowing the individual to become its own entity as a whole within an organization. It provides bargaining power in the workplace and improves the conditions of the workplace through negotiation. A few of the key points with collective bargaining is better pay, hours, and other benefits that can be negotiated instead of just on an individual level. An example of unionization recently that is involving collective bargaining is that of the incident happening with Activision Blizzard. I have a small video here that goes over this incident. So essentially what you saw in that small video was there has been sexual misconduct and such that's taken place at Activision Blizzard. I believe it was the testers at Activision Blizzard they united in a union and to combat this and sued Activision Blizzard for the misconduct, and are now also suing them for better pay, better income equality, better hours, such like that. Things that only really a union can do. In instances where there is sexual misconduct outside of a union, oftentimes it is the individual who has to front the bill for everything, and oftentimes it just gets thrown to the wind. No real justice is ever brought in those instances. So unions help people to be able to have collective bargaining and to essentially be able to defend themselves with a collected unity. Like I said, representation is vital to any workers group. Another example of this is the gaming company Keyword Studio. Keyword Studio is an active developer for the new Dragon Age game, and with the COVID-19 mandates and such, they were able to work from home for the past 3 years. Since those mandates have now gone away, their company Keyword is forcing their workers to go back to work. The employees at Keyword were able to unionize and actually fight against that decision to completely send them back, and were able to keep those previous benefits of being able to work from home for the foreseeable future. Collective bargaining with unions was the main factor that allowed them to be able to keep that. The next point is that of job security through unionization. So a major benefit that can be seen throughout unions throughout time is that of job placement, which is a common fear for many in the game industry. You know, you get a 6-month contract, and after that contract is up, as a private contractor, you have no idea where your next paycheck is going to come from. A common fear for many in the gaming industry is that of losing their job security. Essentially, what a union will allow that to do is, after your contract is up after 6 months, you can continue to move forward to another job because the union has already secured that job for you. That's a common fear that could be alleviated and be a huge boon to the gaming industry as a whole. Historically, unions have done this by enabling negotiations between the union and the company that they work for. And if the company decides to back out of that, there are major stipulations that have to be met in order for them to be able to back out of that bargain. A recent, within the last 3 years, example of this would be that of the company Nexon, which is a Korean-based gaming company who are in a legal battle to secure employment for their employees for the foreseeable future after their latest contract was up. The union was able to actually secure that contract and continue employment for those employees of Nexon. Finally, the last thing that we will look at today is that of union detractors, the negative parts of the union. Now, there's not a lot that I can honestly say is bad with unions. The biggest downside, I would say, would be that of union dues and strikes. Historically, that has been the main thing that has kept unions in a bad light with the common worker, and has been the main thing that's been able to allow companies to say unions are a no-go. Essentially, union dues cause what they say the average employee to not be able to make as much money in the long run because they're having to pay those union dues. Yeah, they may make more money, but the union is taking more out of their pocket, which is not really true. I worked in the electrical field for about 3 years, and I knew a lot of guys who were in unions, and for the most part, they were making more money than I was, even with their union dues. It was just, it wasn't as much money as they could make, right? But also, the probably the biggest thing is that of strikes. Strikes are the biggest thing that people say unions are the devil, essentially. If your union goes on strike, you don't work. And if you do try to go work for your company, you get kicked out of the union and seen as a pariah. It's not very common, but it does happen. So that is one thing I could see in the game industry with strikes and stuff, and how, crazy the economy is right now and going into the future. It would cause that to be an issue. In conclusion, though, unions in the game industry are on the rise. It's undeniable. This is due to an ever pressing need for gaming employees to have better benefits and to have better representation. Pay, hours, benefits, all of that are sought by people who seek out unionization. I think that we will see in the coming years a continued steady rise in unionization in the game industry. Whether it becomes completely commonplace, I think only time will tell. This has been Joshua Castle in digital media, game design history. Thank you again for allowing me to present this, and I hope you have a good day.